What happens when a desperate father walks into a high-end watch shop on Fifth Avenue, clutching his grandfather's vintage Rolex, his last possession of value? The shop owner's eyes widen at the timepiece's authenticity, but his offer is a cruel fraction of its worth. The father's hands tremble as he considers the insulting price, knowing his children haven't eaten a proper meal in days. But what no one realizes is that the tall man in the black leather jacket, browsing luxury timepieces in the corner, is none other than Keanu Reeves. And when he overhears the shop owner's heartless negotiation, the entire store is about to witness something extraordinary. Before we continue, this incredible story of sacrifice, kindness, and redemption will remind you that sometimes angels appear in unexpected places, even in the cold heart of New York City. Michael Thompson stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his worn tie one last time. The dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent worrying about bills, rent, and most importantly, feeding his two young children. At 42, he never imagined he'd be in this position, about to sell his most precious possession just to put food on the table. The small apartment was quiet this morning, his children Emma, 10, and James, 7, still asleep in their shared bedroom. Michael walked to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator out of habit, though he already knew what he'd find. A half-empty bottle of milk, some wilted vegetables, and yesterday's leftovers carefully divided into 2 small portions for the kids' lunch. The weight of his grandfather's Rolex felt heavy in his pocket. He'd sworn never to part with it, but desperate times demanded desperate measures. 3 months without work had drained their emergency savings. The severance package from his accounting job barely covered 2 months' rent, and now even that was gone. Michael gently opened the children's bedroom door. Emma was curled up protectively around her little brother, just like their mother used to do. The thought of Alina brought fresh pain. 2 years since cancer took her, and the medical bills still haunted them. She'd fought so hard, staying positive until the end, making him promise to keep their children happy no matter what. He kissed their foreheads softly, careful not to wake them. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door would watch them while he went to the watch shop. Emma stirred slightly, mumbling, "Love you, Daddy," in her sleep. Michael felt his throat tighten. He'd do anything for them, even this. The morning sun streaming through their small living room window caught the watch's gold surface as Michael took it out one last time. The timepiece had been more than just a gift from his grandfather. It was a symbol of family legacy, of hard work and perseverance. He remembered the day he received it, his grandfather's weathered hands carefully placing it in his palm, telling him stories of how it had seen their family through the Great Depression. Now, standing in their modest apartment, Michael ran his finger over the scratched crystal, each mark telling a story. The slight dent on the side from when Emma was born, his hands shaking with joy as he helped cut the cord. The tiny scratch near the crown from James's first baseball game, when he jumped to catch his son's foul ball without a thought for the watch's safety. Michael slipped the watch back into his pocket, grabbed his worn briefcase, more for appearance than function now, and headed for the door. The Fifth Avenue watch shop opened at 9 a.m. He'd researched online, finding it had the best reputation for fair prices on vintage pieces. Still, the thought of walking into that elegant store, with its polished displays and wealthy clientele, made his stomach turn. But he had no choice. His children needed to eat, and pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Life hadn't always been this hard for Michael Thompson. Just 3 years ago, he was a senior accountant at Reynolds & Partners, one of Manhattan's top financial firms. Their apartment, though modest by New York standards, had always been filled with laughter. Alina's teacher salary combined with his accounting work provided a comfortable life for their family. They'd even started a college fund for the kids. Alina noticed the first symptoms during Emma's ballet recital. A strange numbness in her left arm, then splitting headaches that wouldn't go away. Michael remembered that Tuesday afternoon when the doctor sat them down, his face grave as he showed them the brain scan results. Stage 4 glioblastoma, the words that shattered their world. They fought hard. Alina, ever the optimist, decorated her hospital room with the children's artwork. She graded papers between chemotherapy sessions, determined to finish the school year with her third graders. Michael took on extra projects at work, trying to keep up with the mounting medical bills. Insurance covered some, but the experimental treatments they desperately wanted to try weren't included. Their savings disappeared first, then their investments. Michael borrowed against his 401k, sold their car, and eventually remortgaged their apartment. Alina protested weekly from her hospital bed, but they both knew they'd spend every penny they had for even one more day together. The final months were a blur of hospital corridors, medication schedules, and trying to maintain normalcy for Emma and James. Alina made videos for their future birthdays, wrote letters for their graduations, their weddings. She spent hours teaching Emma how to braid hair and cook simple meals, knowing someone would need to help take care of James. When Alina passed, it was peaceful. She'd waited until both children had fallen asleep in their hospital chairs, squeezed Michael's hand one last time, and slipped away. The hospital bills arrived before the sympathy cards stopped coming. Michael threw himself into work, trying to stay afloat financially while being both mother and father to his grieving children. Reynolds and partners were understanding at first, letting him adjust his hours for school pickups and doctor appointments. Both kids needed counseling to process their loss. Then came the merger. The new management looked at the numbers, not the people. Michael's department was restructured, and despite his 12 years of service, he found himself among the first wave of layoffs. His severance package seemed generous until he calculated the monthly expenses: rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, and the remaining medical bills that still needed paying. He applied everywhere, but the job market was brutal. Younger candidates with fresh degrees were willing to work for less. His callbacks dwindled, then stopped. Unemployment benefits helped briefly, but they weren't enough in a city as expensive as New York. The children adapted with heartbreaking resilience. Emma stopped asking for new ballet shoes when hers got too tight, instead stuffing newspaper in the toes. James didn't complain when they couldn't afford his baseball camp, though Michael caught him practicing alone in the park with a worn ball and his old glove. Each month, Michael sold something else: Alina's jewelry, keeping only her wedding ring for Emma, his good suits, their second TV. He downsized their cable package, cut off his phone service, walked instead of taking the subway. But it wasn't enough. The rent fell behind, then the utilities. The super gave them sympathetic looks but reminded him that business was business. Last night, as he made dinner, plain pasta, the sauce spread thin to make it last longer, he'd caught Emma secretly giving half her portion to James. She smiled just like Alina when he questioned her, saying she'd had a big lunch at school. Michael knew it was a lie. They'd run out of lunch money last week. That's when he knew he had to sell the watch. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. "This watch saw our family through the hardest times, son. It's not just a timepiece. It's hope wrapped in golden gears." His grandfather had almost sold it once, during the Depression, but a surprise job offer saved him from having to part with it. Michael prayed for a similar miracle as he walked toward Fifth Avenue, but he knew better than to expect one. In this city, miracles were as rare as empty taxicabs in the rain. What he didn't know was that sometimes miracles wore black leather jackets and rode motorcycles through Manhattan traffic. The Fifth Avenue watch shop gleamed with polished glass and spotless marble floors. Display cases sparkled under crystal chandeliers, housing timepieces worth more than Michael's yearly salary, back when he had one. The security guard by the door gave him a suspicious glance, taking in his worn suit and scuffed shoes. Michael gripped his grandfather's Rolex tighter in his pocket as he approached the main counter. Behind it stood Anton Voss, the shop's owner, helping a couple examine a new Patek Philippe. His tailored suit and perfectly groomed silver hair exuded wealth and authority. Michael waited patiently, trying not to fidget as other customers browsed nearby. The vintage Rolex date just had been purchased in 1956. Michael knew every detail: the rare champagne dial, the fluted bezel, the Jubilee bracelet that his grandfather had specially ordered. He'd researched similar models online, seeing prices that gave him hope. Even at a fraction of retail value, it could keep them afloat for months. Anton finally finished with the couple and turned to Michael with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How may I assist you today?" His German accent was thick, his tone making it clear he doubted Michael could afford anything in the shop. Michael carefully withdrew the watch, unwrapping it from the soft cloth he'd stored it in. "I'd like to sell this. It's been in my family for 3 generations." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but he forced himself to continue. "It's a 1956 date just, reference 6605. All original parts, including the rare champagne dial." Anton's eyes widened slightly as he took the watch, his demeanor shifting from dismissive to interested. He examined it under a loupe, checking the movement, the serial numbers. "The condition is acceptable. There are several scratches on the crystal, somewhere on the bracelet. The movement will need servicing." Michael's heart sank. He'd known the watch wasn't perfect, but his grandfather had worn it daily for 30 years, then his father for 20 more. It wasn't a safe queen, preserved in a vault, it was a working man's watch, worn with pride through life's moments both mundane and extraordinary. In the corner of the shop, a tall man in a black leather jacket paused his browsing, watching the scene unfold with quiet intensity. None of the other customers paid him any attention, too absorbed in their own shopping to notice the famous face partially hidden behind dark sunglasses. Anton finished his examination and set the watch down with calculated casualness. "I can offer you $8,000. The number hung in the air like a slap. Michael had seen similar watches selling for 5 times that amount. That's impossible. The market value is much higher. Even with the wear, it's worth at least $30,000. Michael tried to keep his voice steady, professional, but desperation crept in at the edges. Anton shrugged, already starting to wrap the watch back in its cloth. "Perhaps to a collector who has time to wait for the right buyer. But I must consider the repairs, the authentication process, my overhead. $8,000 is quite generous, considering." Michael felt the room spin slightly. $8,000 would barely cover 2 months' expenses. He'd counted on this money lasting until he found work, keeping the children fed and the roof over their heads. "Please, there must be some room for negotiation. This watch, it means everything." Anton's expression hardened. "If it means everything, perhaps you should keep it. $8,000 is my final offer. Take it or leave it." He pushed the wrapped watch back across the counter, his dismissal clear. Michael stared at the small bundle, his grandfather's words echoing in his mind. The watch had seen their family through the Depression, through wars, through countless hardships. But it couldn't see them through this one. His children's faces flashed before him, Emma trying not to show her hunger, James asking in a small voice when they could buy groceries again. He reached for the watch with trembling hands, ready to accept the insulting offer. What choice did he have? But before his fingers could touch the cloth, a deep, calm voice spoke from behind him. "I believe you're undervaluing more than just the watch, Mr. Voss." Michael turned to find Keanu Reeves standing there, his presence commanding attention without effort. The entire shop fell silent, all eyes turning to watch what would happen next. The atmosphere in the watch shop crystallized as Keanu Reeves removed his sunglasses, tucking them into his jacket pocket. Anton Voss straightened his posture, recognition flickering across his face. The other customers whispered among themselves, phones discreetly emerging to capture the moment. "Mr. Reeves," Anton managed, his accent thickening with nervousness. "What an unexpected honor. I assure you, I'm offering a fair market price considering the condition. Keanu picked up the wrapped watch, handling it with reverence. "Fair market price? I collect vintage timepieces, Mr. Voss. This date just referenced 6605 with an original champagne dial recently sold at auction for $45,000. And that one didn't carry half the story this watch does." He turned to Michael, whose face had drained of color upon recognizing the actor. "May I?" Michael nodded wordlessly, and Keanu carefully unwrapped the watch, holding it under the crystal chandelier light. "Every mark on this watch tells a story, doesn't it?" Michael swallowed hard. "My grandfather bought it new in 1956. He wore it every day working at the steel mill, saving to send my father to college. Dad wore it through medical school, through 30 years of emergency room shifts. He was wearing it the night he delivered my daughter Emma." Keanu traced the scratch on the crystal. "And this mark? My son's first baseball game." Michael's voice grew stronger as he remembered. "He hit a foul ball. I caught it without thinking about the watch." The look on his face was worth more than any timepiece. The shop had fallen completely silent. Even Anton stood transfixed as Michael continued. "My grandfather said this watch saw our family through the hardest times. Through wars, recessions, personal losses. He called it hope wrapped in gold and gears." Keanu turned to Anton, his voice carrying quiet authority. "You're not just buying a vintage Rolex, Mr. Voss. You're buying 3 generations of American history, of family dedication, of fathers sacrificing everything for their children." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And you want to pay $8,000 for that?" Anton shifted uncomfortably. "The market fluctuates. Repairs will be costly. The market does fluctuate," Keanu agreed. But integrity shouldn't. This man isn't selling his watch on a whim. He's selling it because sometimes being a father means giving up the things you love most to take care of the people you love more. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. Tears he'd been holding back for months threatened to spill over. How long had he been carrying this weight alone? Keanu placed the watch back on the counter. So, Mr. Voss, would you like to reconsider your offer? Or should I make one instead? Anton's face flushed. The presence of a Hollywood star, the phone's recording, the watching crowd. He knew this moment could make or break his shop's reputation. Perhaps I was hasty. The piece is quite rare, after all. I could offer 25,000. 35, Keanu countered. And you'll service it properly before resale. Anton nodded quickly, eager now to appear generous. Of course. 35,000. Full service before resale. He turned to Michael. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. But Keanu wasn't finished. Actually, I have a better idea. He turned to Michael. You said this watch has seen your family through hard times. Why should that tradition end now? Michael blinked in confusion. I don't understand. I'm opening a new production office here in New York. We need someone to manage the accounting, someone trustworthy, detail-oriented, with experience in both corporate and personal finance. Keanu smiled slightly. Someone who understands the value of time and family. The implications slowly dawned on Michael. Are you offering me a job? Better than that. I'm offering you a career. Full benefits, including comprehensive health insurance for your family. Flexible hours so you can be there for your children. Keanu picked up the watch again. And most importantly, you get to keep this where it belongs, with your family. Michael stood speechless, his mind racing. A job. Insurance. Security. Everything he'd been praying for, appearing out of nowhere in a luxury watch shop on a desperate morning. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, Keanu replied. Though given what you were willing to sacrifice for your children, I already know what kind of person you are. And those are exactly the kind of people I want to work with. The shop erupted in applause. Anton, sensing the shift in public opinion, hurried to add, and please, consider me a friend of the family now. Your watch will always receive complimentary service here. Michael looked down at his grandfather's watch, still gleaming after all these years. Maybe the old man was right. It really was hope wrapped in golden gears. He just hadn't expected Hope to arrive wearing a black leather jacket and riding a motorcycle. Thank you, he managed finally. Not just for the job, but for seeing the value in things that can't be measured in dollars. Keanu nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that don't have a price tag. The love of a father for his children. The sacrifices we make for family. The stories behind the scratches on an old watch. He pulled out a business card, writing a number on the back. Come by the office tomorrow. We'll sort out the details. For now, go home to your children. Tell them things are going to get better. As Michael carefully rewrapped his grandfather's watch, he felt lighter than he had in months. The weight of desperation lifted from his shoulders, replaced by something he'd almost forgotten, hope. Sometimes miracles did happen, even in New York City. Sometimes they just needed a little help from a kind stranger in a black leather jacket. 3 months passed like a dream. Michael's life transformed in ways he could hardly believe. The production office job proved to be everything Keanu had promised and more. His new salary covered their expenses comfortably, with enough left over to start rebuilding their savings. The flexible hours meant he could drop Emma off at ballet practice and watch James's baseball games without worry. The office itself was modern but welcoming, located in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. His team respected his experience and valued his input. For the first time since Alina's passing, Michael felt like himself again. Not just surviving, but living. The morning started like any other, with Michael making breakfast for the kids. But today was different. The refrigerator hummed contentedly, full of fresh groceries. Emma sat at the kitchen table, working on her homework while James devoured his pancakes, maple syrup threatening to drip onto his baseball uniform. Dad, Emma looked up from her math book. Mrs. Rodriguez says she saw you on TikTok again. The video of you and Mr. Reeves at the watch shop has millions of views now. Michael smiled, adjusting his grandfather's watch on his wrist. The timepiece gleamed in the morning light, recently serviced by Anton Voss himself. The watchmaker had become almost embarrassingly accommodating, insisting on handling all maintenance personally. "People seem to like happy endings," Michael replied, packing James's lunch. "Real lunch, not just stretched leftovers. Speaking of which, don't forget, we're having dinner with Keanu tonight." The children's eyes lit up. Over the past months, Keanu had become more than just their father's employer. He stopped by occasionally, always bringing thoughtful gifts, a new baseball glove for James, art supplies for Emma. More importantly, he brought stories and kindness, treating the children with genuine interest and respect. The watch shop had changed too. The viral video of Keanu's intervention had transformed Anton Voss's reputation. Instead of trying to lowball desperate sellers, he began offering fair prices and understanding terms. His shop became known for compassion as much as luxury, and business actually improved. That evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of a family restaurant, Keanu noticed Michael checking his watch. "Still keeping perfect time?" "Never misses a beat," Michael smiled. "Just like my grandfather promised." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about that day in the shop. About how close you came to losing something precious, not because you wanted to, but because circumstances forced your hand." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "That's why I started this." Michael opened the envelope and stared at the contents in disbelief. It was documentation for a new charitable foundation, the Timekeepers Fund. "It's a program to help people in situations like yours," Keanu explained as Emma and James leaned in curiously. "When someone needs to sell a family heirloom out of desperation, the fund steps in. They get a fair loan, using the heirloom as collateral, but they keep it. When they're back on their feet, they can repay the loan without interest." Michael felt his throat tighten. "This is incredible." "The best part," Keanu continued, smiling at the children, "I want you to run it. You understand both the financial side and the human side. You know what it means to almost lose something precious. Who better to help others keep their family treasures?" Emma spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. "Like Mom's wedding ring? The one you saved for me?" Michael touched the chain around Emma's neck, where Alina's ring now hung. He'd been able to buy it back from the jewelry store last month. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. The foundation launches next month," Keanu said. "We already have backing from several major auction houses and dealers. Even Anton Voss is contributing." James looked up from his pasta. "Dad, does this mean you'll help other people like Mr. Reeves helped us?" Michael reached over and ruffled his son's hair. "That's exactly what it means, buddy." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Michael sat in his favorite chair, holding his grandfather's watch. The same chair where, just 3 months ago, he'd sat in despair, counting coins and wondering how to feed his children. He thought about all the other parents out there, facing impossible choices. Selling wedding rings to pay medical bills. Parting with family heirlooms to keep their homes. Now, because one person chose kindness over profit, they would have another option. A bridge over troubled waters. Just like his grandfather used to say. The watch ticked steadily in his hands, marking time as it had for 3 generations. But now it would help mark time for other families too, giving them the chance to keep their treasures, their memories, their hope. His phone buzzed with a text from Keanu. "Hope you're ready for Monday. We've already got our first case, a woman in Queens, trying to sell her grandmother's pearls to pay for her son's surgery." Michael smiled, typing back, "Ready. It's about time someone helped her keep those pearls where they belong." He looked at his grandfather's watch one last time before heading to bed. The scratch from James's baseball game caught the light, and for a moment, Michael could almost hear his grandfather's voice. "Sometimes, son, the most valuable things in life aren't the ones in the display case. They're the stories we pass down, the love we share, and the help we give to others when they need it most." The watch ticked on, marking not just time, but the beginning of something new. A chance to transform other lives the way his had been transformed. Because sometimes, hope really does come wrapped in golden gears, and sometimes it wears a black leather jacket and rides a motorcycle through Manhattan traffic. On a crisp autumn morning 2 years later, Michael stood behind the counter of what used to be Anton Voss's watch shop. The store had transformed, just like his life. Gone were the intimidating security guards and cold marble floors. Instead, Warm wood panels and comfortable seating areas welcomed visitors. A sign above the door read, "Timekeepers Watch and Jewelry," where every story matters. The Timekeepers Fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a simple idea, helping people keep their family heirlooms, blossomed into a movement. Other luxury retailers took notice, realizing that compassion could coexist with commerce. Michael's office upstairs buzzed with activity as his team reviewed applications, arranged loans, and most importantly, listened to stories. Emma, now 12, sat at a small desk near the window, doing her homework. She'd made it her mission to document every story that came through their doors, filling notebooks with tales of family treasures and the memories they held. James, 9, practiced pitching with a softball in the courtyard, visible through the shop's windows. His little league team had made it to the championships, and Michael hadn't missed a single game. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman entered, clutching a velvet box. Michael recognized the look in her eyes. He'd worn it himself that desperate morning 2 years ago. Emma looked up from her homework, ready with her notebook. "Welcome to Timekeepers," Michael smiled warmly. "I'm Michael Thompson. How can we help you today?" The woman placed the velvet box on the counter with trembling hands. "I saw your website about helping people keep their family jewelry." She opened the box, revealing a stunning Art Deco bracelet. It was my great-grandmother's. She wore it when she immigrated here through Ellis Island. I never wanted to sell it, but my daughter's medical bills. Michael nodded, understanding. "May I?" He carefully lifted the bracelet, noting the fine craftsmanship, the stories etched in every link. "Tell me about your great-grandmother." As the woman shared her family's history, Emma wrote quietly in her notebook. This was their real business now, not just preserving jewelry, but preserving stories, keeping families connected to their past while helping them build their future. The door chimed again. Keanu walked in, casual in his trademark black jacket. The young woman's eyes widened in recognition, but Keanu just smiled and stood back, letting Michael continue his work. "We can help you keep this bracelet in your family," Michael explained. "The Timekeepers Fund will provide a loan based on its value. Once your daughter's bills are paid and you're back on your feet, you can repay it, no interest, no pressure. The bracelet stays with you where it belongs." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that," Michael confirmed, his grandfather's watch catching the light as he reached for the paperwork. "Someone once helped me keep my family's treasure. Now we help others do the same." After the woman left, clutching her great-grandmother's bracelet and loan documents, Keanu approached the counter. 2 years of changing lives. How does it feel?" Michael looked around the shop, at Emma writing in her notebook, at James practicing outside, at the wall of photographs showing families reunited with their treasures. "It feels like we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do." Keanu picked up one of Emma's notebooks, reading the latest entry. "You know, when I stopped that morning to browse watches, I never expected to help start something like this." "Funny how life works," Michael smiled. "One act of kindness ripples outward, touching more lives than we can imagine." The shop's new sign caught the afternoon sun, casting warm light across the floor. Where once stood a cold temple to luxury now stood a sanctuary of hope, a place where family histories were preserved, where desperate choices became new beginnings. Michael's grandfather's watch kept time steadily on his wrist, its scratches and dents now joined by new marks, new stories. But it wasn't just marking time anymore, it was marking lives changed, memories preserved, hope restored. That evening, as Michael locked up the shop, Emma showed him her latest story collection. "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of what we're doing?" Michael hugged his daughter close, feeling Alina's wedding ring press against his chest where it hung on Emma's necklace. "She'd be so proud, sweetheart. So proud of all of us." They walked home together through the busy New York streets, past other shops and other lives. Michael's grandfather's watch ticked steadily, marking not just the passage of time, but the endurance of family, the power of kindness, and the truth that sometimes the most precious things in life aren't things at all. They're the stories we share, the help we give, and the hope we pass on to others. Because in the end, every watch, every ring, every treasured heirloom tells a story. And thanks to one chance encounter in a watch shop, thousands of those stories would continue to be told, passed down through generations, wrapped in golden gears, preserved by kindness and understanding.